A new lawsuit against former President Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani will try to hold them responsible for the assault on the Capitol. The filing from the NAACP and a Mississippi congressman say they violated the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871 by conspiring to incite the riot on January 6th. I want to bring in Derrick Johnson. He's the president and the CEO of the NAACP, and Congressman Bennie Thompson from Mississippi, who is the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee and the named plaintiff in this lawsuit. Thank you, gentlemen, for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, Derrick,
Thank you for having me.
Let me get to you first, Derrick. The basis of this suit is the allegation that former President Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and these other groups violated the 1871 Ku Klux Klan Act. Tell us about the act and the history behind it and why it can be applied in this scenario.
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me back on. In the aftermath of the Civil War, when this country was seeking to reunite, Southern members of Congress was seeking to carry out their duties. But you had groups like the KKK and other former Confederate sympathizers seeking to intimidate and prevent the carrying out of congressional duties to ensure we had a united states, not a divided states. The act was put in place to protect those members of Congress so that we can actually have a democracy that stands up to the promise of the Constitution, without individuals being in fear of their intimidation or threat to their lives. And what we've seen on January 6th fit perfectly of why this act was created, to prevent white supremacists and domestic terrorists from causing harm or intimidating members of Congress carrying out their duties.
So as I understand it, the act has to do with seeking compensation. And at first, when I heard that the NAACP was filing this lawsuit, I thought, well, how are they going to argue compensation? But Congressman Thompson, that's where you come in. You lay out, your pretty harrowing account of your experience on January 6th. I hope you are doing all right, but I am sure there is some emotional fallout from that experience. Talk about why you wanted to be involved in this lawsuit.
Well, when Derrick and I started talking about the possibility of NAACP representing me, he was well aware that I was one of those individuals in the Capitol on January 6th when this violent insurrection occurred. And the fact that for the better part of an hour, I was really unsure as to what real danger lurked outside the doors that had been closed. Moving forward, I heard the shot that ultimately killed the lady who was trying to break in along with other people. And I was also moved or evacuated to another location that put me in a health-related environment because there were about 300 people assembled in a room for the better part of 2 hours. Some of my Republican colleagues were not masking up as required by the health standards. So this whole day, I felt, was a method of intimidating me and other members of Congress from doing our constitutional duties. This Constitution requires us to meet in joint session and certify the previous election for president, which we were trying to do. And these rioters, obviously prompted by President Trump at that time, Rudy Giuliani and others, tried to prevent us. So we looked at it, and we looked at the novelty behind this Ku Klux Klan Act, because in our mind, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers have morphed out of the Klan connection because they are racist in their orientation. They tried to do everything to impede people of color and progressive people from asserting their rights as American citizens. And so this is an opportunity from a punitive standpoint in this lawsuit to put them out of business. And I'm happy to be a plaintiff in this suit, and I look forward to having my day in court.
So President Trump did release a statement through a spokesperson in response to the suit. He denied any responsibility, and he touted his acquittal in the Senate. And the statement in part said, President Trump did not incite any violence at the Capitol on January 6th. Pretty on the message there. Derrick, obviously you disagree. Lay out the argument for us. Which actions by the former president, Rudy Giuliani, and these other groups are you taking issue with, and why? I mean, we saw, for those of us who watched the impeachment trial, the House managers laid out very plainly for the American people the number of times the president sought to demolish the faith in our elections and in our institutions overall. But just tell us specifically what this suit specifically points to.
Well, first of all, the impeachment trial is a political proceedings. It is not a court of law. And in that political proceedings, unfortunately, members in the Senate, particularly Republicans, couldn't get beyond partisanship and look at this based on our Constitution. There were a plethora of violations of the law. It was in direct contradiction of our Constitution. This was a treasonous act, simply attempting to thwart the peaceful transfer of government. They made the case that not only the president, but the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, Rudy Giuliani, making calls as late as 3 a.m., asking members of Congress to slow down the certification of the elections. All of those things were carefully laid out during that proceedings. But now we're in a court of law. It is a different standard. It's not based on partisanship. And we believe that there are enough facts, video, and statements directly from the president, whether given in speeches or through his tweets, that would show conclusively that there was a conspiracy to prevent the peaceful transfer of power in this country.
Congressman, will some of what we saw during the impeachment trial also be sort of part of this lawsuit? And I'm curious about your take on Mitch McConnell's final words at the impeachment trial. He did vote to acquit the president, but then he also said that he felt that the president was responsible for the riot.
Exactly, and that's why we included Mitch McConnell's comments in the lawsuit. This is Bennie, Thompson, NAACP, and some others having our day in court. The picture you showed while Derrick was talking is one of the examples of what we're talking about. Those individuals going up the steps, entering the second floor of the United States Capitol, that is prohibited. Only members of Congress are allowed to access the Capitol by those steps. So you saw those hundreds of people going up the steps, which mean they had already breached the security area for the Capitol. In addition, they broke in. And one of the points that the impeachment managers presented, if you look at all the tweets and comments after the election, President Trump invited all those individuals to come to Washington. It's going to be wild on January 6th. The only thing that was scheduled to occur on January 6th was the certification of the election. And during his speech, he said, you need to go to the Capitol and stop the steal. And so those individuals left the area that had been permitted to have a rally to go to an area that had not been permitted to have a rally, and ultimately broke into the Capitol. The head of the Oath Keepers, for instance, broke one of the windows out of the Capitol. We have that on film. So there are a lot of things that we think the House impeachment managers have provided us that justify this lawsuit. But more importantly, this is one of the avenues the framers of the Constitution have put in place. If we disagree, we can have our differences in court. And we are partnering with the NAACP. We think we have a good case. And for whatever reason, Donald Trump could not get over the fact that he had lost his election. They filed over 60 lawsuits all around the country alleging all kinds of illegal acts. But if you notice, the majority of those suits were filed in communities of high African-American populations. Pennsylvania, around Philadelphia, Detroit, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There's a code word for what Donald Trump was trying to do. And that code word is being rejected by the NAACP and others, that in America, we settle our differences at the ballot box. The people spoke. Donald Trump has to go away. If he doesn't, we will put him out of business. One of the punitive measures in this lawsuit, just like we did certain branches of the Ku Klux Klan and other groups, when you hit them punitively in their pocketbook, then you put them out of business. And that's what ultimately we want to do with this lawsuit.
And, you know, it's important to note, as we have in the past when we've spoken to you, Derrick, that the former president consistently brings up the 75 million people that voted for him. Actually, the number is 74 million, and never talks about the 80 million plus who voted for President Biden and what that would mean to disenfranchising them, as Congressman Thompson is saying. And let me just switch gears a bit, Derrick. And you met with President Biden before the inauguration, and you urged him to create this position in the White House to address civil rights issues. Have you had any more conversations with him about that? And what do you think of the work his administration is doing so far, specifically as it relates to these issues?
Well, you can feel the difference in the tone that's coming out of the White House. We had to live through 4 years of racism, anti-Semitic, xenophobia coming from the White House. And in the 4 weeks we've seen this new administration, it's a different tone. We have been in ongoing communication with key members of his staff, his advisors, and cabinet. We are pleased with Susan Rice holding the portfolio of racial equity. There's been an open dialogue about what that means and how that could be rolled out. They have been very receptive to input, not only from the NAACP, but from many groups in the civil rights community and the Latino community. That's promising. When you have a country like the United States with so many people from many backgrounds and walks of life, we must respect all of our citizens. Race is a social construct. We must destroy that caste system so we can truly be the nation that our potential would allow us to be. And what we've seen over the last 4 years was a suffocation of that. And the reason why we're having this lawsuit, you live in the South, you understand that racial hatred, white supremacist behavior, but most importantly, domestic terrorism, if it goes unchecked, it will pester the reality of so many people's lives for years. We had to face that in the South through the 30s and the 40s and the 50s with racial hate, domestic terrorist group terrorizing African-American communities. If we don't hold people accountable now, we will be doomed to a future of that existence. We should not tolerate that in this nation.
Listen, Derrick, while we have you here, I wanted to ask you about another story that's making the news. A new lawsuit filed this week against McDonald's by the owner of what was once one of the largest black-owned McDonald's franchise operations. He is accusing the company of favoring white franchise owners, pushing black owners to buy restaurants in poorer neighborhoods where it's more challenging to sustain profitability. Now, McDonald's, released a statement essentially saying that the owner, really this is the owner's problem. This is the side effect of mismanagement on his part. But this is not the first time this sort of lawsuit has been brought against McDonald's by several black franchise owners. I want to get your take on not just what's happening with McDonald's, but sort of the broader issue. Have you seen similar complaints when we're talking about big companies that work on a franchise system doing what these black owners are suggesting that McDonald's is doing, which is being unfair and making it more challenging for black owners to be successful?
Well, absolutely. In fact, if you're talking about McDonald's specifically, it was about 2 years ago. The Congressman and I actually was having meetings with McDonald's around opening up opportunities for African-American contractors and vendors. I'm familiar with the lawsuit. This is something that has been of concern. McDonald's at one point was a great representation of diversity by including more franchise owners. But over the last several years, we've heard ongoing complaints around African-American franchise owners only being given what they call the dog stores that require more maintenance but lack the traffic to maintain the type of profitability. And I'm not alleging that McDonald's is wrong, but the problem here is if you have a significant number of franchise owners and they are saying that this is a problem, we really need to take a look at that. But it's not only McDonald's. Structural racism in this country have allowed corporate actors to demean the ability of African-American entrepreneurs and the African-American community from truly engaging on an equal footing. I will hope McDonald's Corporation take any allegations of discrimination serious. They will take a serious look at how they can open up opportunities because their customer base is a large percentage African Americans and other communities. And we will hope all corporations will do that. Racism in this country is a problem. We all acknowledge that. What we do about it is our opportunity. The question for McDonald's, the question for corporate America, how are we going to seize upon an opportunity to have a more inclusive society moving forward so they can open up markets and empower more of their customer base?
I'm going to be watching this lawsuit closely. I think it's really, really interesting. You recall that, McDonald's had an African-American CEO for at least a few years. And to me, it just sort of speaks to the whole conversation about, sort of representation isn't good enough. You need, a whole sort of system-wide change. I will point out that McDonald's says this issue has to do with the particular franchisee and not with the way they conduct business. So Derrick Johnson and Congressman Bennie Thompson, so glad both of you gentlemen joined us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.